For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor. There has recently been a spate of reported cases described as femicide and other cases of attacks on women and children. Is SA more violent now and more prone to gender and sexually based murders than other societies?
You know, it's very hard to tell because every now and again there are highly publicized cases, so that if they happen close to one another, one gets the impression that there is more rape and attacks on children, sometimes babies, old people, that is, the crime rate is increasing in regard to these types of crimes. But what is important to remember is it's very hard for us to tell what is the exact scale of rape and other attacks on women, children and vulnerable people, because very often they are not reported. People do not want to go to the police station because they have said that they feel that the atmosphere that they encounter is not conducive to telling their story. That is why the new minister, who is uneven but is showing a degree of sensitivity to this, and he's saying that you know, they must take proper steps to ensure that there is an environment for a rape complainant to report the case, to do so in privacy, and to have the police officers respond with sensitivity. So that's the one thing, that they are afraid to report it. But they're also afraid to report it very often because what follows the report is often very difficult for the complainant, because police often do not bring a case, they do not they lose the evidence, or if the rapist is a family member or the father or the husband, they sometimes try to prevent it being registered as a crime and refer the person back to settle it in the home. And what is raised in some of the commentary of these femicide cases, murders of women, is that we don't really know how many women are being murdered and raped by men who are intimate partners, because the statistics usually don't reflect that this is murder by an intimate partner. It is really just murder of another woman. And I think this is a very important thing, that the home is supposed to be a place of safety. And statistics or research all over the world tends to suggest that the home is the place where most women, or very many women, actually expect to if they do encounter rape or assaults of other types, that is where they expect to encounter it. So there's a myth that the danger of rape lies only in going in dark streets or nightclubs, things like that. There was 14 European states that were studied, and the women there, like 40% of the women there, said what they really feared was violence against them, including rape, in their home. What is also important to stress is that the public response to rapes is very ambiguous. You know, like the Minister of Women Affairs said something like Karabo was also vulnerable, like in a way that implied that by staying in this relationship, she actually exposed herself to the possibility of rape. So that there's a range of ways in which the discourse around rape tends to actually blame the victim or the survivor. And we've got to do something about this situation where women are blamed for dressing in a way which is said to be provocative and inviting rape, or going into places which are dangerous. Now, what that means is, first of all, you're curbing, to solve the problem of rape, you're not looking at the rapists and what can be done to stop rapists from raping. You're actually saying the freedom of women must be curtailed. They cannot walk in places that men are free to walk in. They cannot dress as they want to dress, because if they dress in a particular way, they are likely to be violently assaulted. And that brings me to another thing that's very important that we deploy when we try to understand this. When people say these are terrible, heinous crimes, and sometimes the previous minister, one of the previous ministers of Women's Affairs, was trying to respond with outrage by saying that men must be, the rapists must be castrated and things like that. Now, what a lot of these responses suggest is that it is a sexual crime, that the person who is attacking the woman has succumbed to temptation, and that person has not been able to control his sexual urges. But rape is actually a violent attack on a woman, and sexuality is actually an engagement of love or warmth between human beings, not an assault on human beings. Now, the best way of proving this is the case is, how can attacks on babies be called sexual? I mean, how can the baby have aroused, done something that arouses a man? So I think we've got to try to understand it, and I would not say that we've got more rape or sexually or other or killings of women now than we've had before. I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't know partly because I don't have the information, but partly the information is not available officially because a lot of people are not reporting these things, and we've got to have a situation where authorities are more sensitized to this.
So what can we do about it?
You know, I think it's important that we do educate the public about this question that I raised earlier, that we're not dealing with sexuality that is uncontrolled, some pervert and all this sort of stuff. What you're really dealing with, and also it's not going to be addressed purely by, I think it's important that men make declarations that real men don't rape and all these sorts of things, and that they undertake and that you do work with rapists and all these sorts of things. These things are important, but we've got to understand that there are structural things in our society and other societies which are conducive to men acting violently, and especially towards women. And it relates to patriarchy, casting men in a particular role, casting men as being rough, tough thinkers, but also valorizing, treating as worthy of admiration a man who is strong, so that boys grow up wanting to become strong like some other person. Now, treating strength as really important, more important than ethical behavior, considerate behavior, is one step away from condoning acts of violence. And in the world, something like 85% of acts of violence are committed by men. Women do commit acts of violence, but men commit it primarily against women, but also against other men. And that means that we've got to be looking at the models of masculinity that we have in our society. What type of men do we admire? Now, at the moment, I feel we have a problem with an absence of worthy models that we can say to young boys, why don't you be like Nelson Mandela or Walter Sisulu or something like that? You don't have enough of these people. So we actually have to grow them. We have to communicate these values from when they are children, that hitting someone is not good. There are ways of resolving conflicts which human beings are specially qualified to do, unlike ordinary animals. Homo sapiens means thinking man, thinking human beings. They must be able to talk, discuss differences, and not act with violence. So I just see the way of addressing this is, first of all, to identify what it is, that it is not sexuality that has been aroused. That is an attack on women. Some people refer to misogyny, hatred of women, that many of these people actually hate women and have contempt for women as women and think it's right to attack them. I wouldn't say that's always the reason, but I think we've got to try to get to the roots, and the roots are ultimately to get rid of patriarchy.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about violence against women in a violent society.